All right, we are live with episode 21, and I'm going to go around the horn real quick with Wes Spencer, Justin Reinmuth, Mike Burgard, Gary Pica, and Kyle Hanslovan. Welcome, everybody, to episode 21. Thanks for joining us. We got an action-packed show today, and it's about having the conversation. Gary, not the one that you and I have had with our kids, although this is equally as important, I think, if you're in the cybersecurity field. Fair?
Absolutely, Andrew. This is something we're going to open up a conversation on today, but it's not as simple as do this and this happens. It's a process.
Absolutely. Well, in that process, what I'm going to do is everybody's getting settled in here. We've got a bunch of people joining. I'm going to throw out a quick poll and let everybody see what they say about that. Oh, did I? Yeah, that went out there. Good. I think it went out. Yes. Can you guys check? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
You got it.
Out there. Okay. Few quick.
Can you use bona fide in the poll? The word bona fide?
Can you believe that? I actually used the dictionary.
Yeah.
All right. So a few quick announcements. We talk every week. Cyber Nation taking off, ordering right on 700 right now in 4 weeks. So it's a lot of interactions going on. So that's very excited about that. In November, early November 11th, we're going to be doing a CMMC webinar with Ryan Bonner. It's going to be really interesting. We're going to do that. Kyle, we got Tradecraft Tuesday next Tuesday.
Yep.
So
next Tuesday.
I'll throw that in there once we get going here because I want to get things moving because we really got something cool at the end. We're going to do a sales call role play, and a gentleman named Keenan is going to come on stage. And Keenan isn't here. I haven't checked yet, but if he isn't, we're going to have to bring back Wes's beard and pouring, which is the top grossing YouTube video that I have on my YouTube channel, Wes. Well, I haven't gotten any right yet.
You know, let me see if he's in real quick. I can see if I can grab him. Yeah, there he is. He's here and ready to go. So he's on standby.
All right. Awesome. Okay, so let's get right on into a few quick intros. Justin,
you got to look at the poll.
What's that?
The poll.
Okay.
Results.
Okay, let's go to the poll results. All right, Gary, you want to tell everybody what they look like, or can you see them?
Yeah. Almost 90% of the people said yes. I get pushbacks from prospects and customers when there's actual security gaps, and only around 10% of the people said that that's not happening. So one thing is when we get to that portion, if anybody who answered no, they're not getting that pushback, that might be a great way to open, to hear why they're not getting that might be really valuable as we start to dive into it.
Yeah, that would be awesome. You could like throw those in as questions, even just like here's why we're not getting pushback. I'm assuming, Gary, they're TruMethods members.
I don't know.
All right, few quick intros. Justin Reinmuth, Reinmuth, who was with us a few weeks ago. Justin with the Technology Risk Underwriting Group, 16,000+ cybersecurity policies, understands our business just a little bit, works with MSPs, IT folks. Justin, welcome. Tell a little quick about yourself, even though I probably just did it.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate it. I know I was here 2 weeks ago, so if I'm repeating myself, I apologize. But when I first started in the insurance industry, I did have an IT background, and just kind of working through and seeing that, this was back in 2004. I got involved and strictly started focusing on IT companies back in 2009. But just going through these policies, I realized real quick that these are kind of unregulated policies, like we talked about the last time. And so, there were a lot of IT service providers, I wouldn't call them MSPs back then, that were running around without the necessary coverages that they need. And so, I think we, again, talked about that, but, understanding these policies are unregulated, kind of the devil's in the detail, make sure that your policy aligns with your service offerings, because if not, you could get yourself into trouble. There are specialists out there, and I just, again, if you're going to use a medical analogy, if you got a heart problem, you don't go to an ear, nose, and throat specialist, right? You go to a cardiologist. So I would say if you got a cyber problem, go to a cyber specialist.
That's it. And the reason I wanted to bring you back, Justin, is, hey, you're in the heart of sales. It's what you do on a day in and day out basis. You're having risk-based conversations. That's what this is about today. So thanks for joining us back again.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate it.
Yeah. And then we've got the illustrious CISO of Marco, Mike Burgard. Mike, welcome. Thanks for coming back. And for those of them out there that, even though I can't speak, may not know you, tell us a little about yourself, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Mike Burgard, CISO Marco Technologies. We're an MSP up in the upper Midwest. We've spread out into the East Coast just a little bit. Got quite a few sales reps that I work with here. And then my background, I spent 10 years in the financial space in leadership roles, including security. And I spent 6 years spread between manufacturing and K-12 prior to that.
Awesome.
So thanks for having me.
Hey, we're psyched to have you, Mike. All right, so let's get right on into it here, Mike. I'm going to just ask a few, kind of set the stage here, and then I'm going to turn it over to one of the guys that I think is the best at sales ever, which is Gary Pica. So Ever's a long time, and Ever's a pretty big state.
That is pretty big.
And, and when I say Ever's and always, anyway. But Mike, wanted to, you and I talked a lot about sales, right? So, and specifically selling cybersecurity. And, one of the things, you insinuated or were sharing with me is that, well, what do you have? Sorry, you instituted something kind of unique is what I wanted to say at Marco. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, a few months back, we started what I've called it a couple of things, I guess, a cyber roundtable or State of the Union and security. We've called it a number of things. I kind of like the roundtable personally, but really it's once a month I pull all of our sales force together, which is a couple hundred sales reps, and we talk security. It's when we talk current events, we talk what's happening, we've talked alphabet soup, we talk a lot of different topics, but it's always focused on security. I think one of the things that you and I talked about is we have such a hard time with this. And why is it? I know you're a fan of the challenger sale, and as am I. And I think one of the elements that when we look at that, in order to challenge, you have to have a certain level of knowledge in order to challenge effectively. Yeah. And I think, especially when you look at a lot of sales reps like you've got knowledge and skill sets all over the board. All these folks have different backgrounds, and ultimately, they just don't have knowledge in security. That's really what it comes down to. So we're taking a different approach and a more direct approach in education and talk tracks that we want our sales force to talk about.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. And how long have you been doing this? You've got about 200 or so reps, right? And right. I think you have something like over 1,200 managed clients. And so you have a pretty substantial organization there. And also there's a whole VAR side of the business. How long have you been doing it? And with that, maybe share a little about that, and I'll transition it to Gary to talk about some of the results, how you guys are doing those things.
Yeah, we started back, June was the first month that we enacted this. And I took the approach that I want people to be there that want to be there. So we're not requiring it for all employees. I think that's the first thing, right? We sent it out as basically a lunch and learn style format. Hey, come join. We're going to do it at 12 o'clock Central, which is predominantly where we're based. We're going to do it 12 to 1. Bring your lunch. We'll make it the first half hour or so presentation only. The security group or our guest speakers. And to be upfront, part of the idea came from this, right? We took a similar format where we might pull different people in. And we're going to talk security for the first half, and then we'll open it up to discussion and roundtable and answer questions. And I think the cool thing about it, so by making it non-required, I think actually improved attendance. We on average run about 75% attendance, and the recordings actually do get watched as well. So I think it's been pretty neat to see just adoption in the organization.
So just real quick, Gary, as I turn it to you, I just want to ask Mike, can we get some royalty fees from your organization?
So you'll get a percentage of what I pay.
Yeah, Mike. So with that, because I got a couple angles here, but what changes have you seen as a result of this, of people attending this? What's changed in terms of their behavior, or have you gotten any feedback?
We have. The feedback has been very, very positive. First and foremost, I think just people learning things that can benefit themselves, that can benefit their friends and family, and that benefit their customers. And ultimately it's a client endeavor. I think it was said earlier, right? It's the journey, not the destination. I think that's been the first thing that we've wanted to impart on our sales force. Security is never a one-time thing, right? We want to sell something and then move on with life. And it just doesn't work that way. It's the journey that gets us there. And I think things that we've seen, tangible things that we've seen, is our sales reps have now gotten engagements with clients that they've never been able to engage with before. Right?
In your model, are they selling the cybersecurity, or are they, bringing up the needs? And do you do some type of assessment, for those gaps? How does it work? Like, what's their role in the process? Because they sell other things.
They do sell a lot. So I'd say typically it starts with assessment, right? And that's one of the things that they really do push. And in our organization, we are large enough that then in some cases drives different sales focused folks to come into the account.
Yep. That's good. And then, so with this, like, the point I try to make to people is that, you can sell cybersecurity sales and you can have a great conversation. You don't need to be Kyle or Wes. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to have all the knowledge. So how do you focus that on things that are helpful to them so that they seem like they understand, like, what the risks are, what's happening, like those kind of things? That again, you're not trying to make them technical people. You're trying to make them have some command over knowing more, right, about the reality of what's going on with the changing landscape.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the ways that we do that is we use current events. We loop in current events and we back it up with statistics. So we'll pull in, it could be CISO statistics, or it could be something from the FBI. It could be something from Huntress or Perch as well, where they've made a publication, and we'll pull that into the conversation track. And then one of the things that we follow up with after every one of these, we give them a deliverable. And ultimately what we're giving them is potentially slide deck material, right? Use this talk track, take it elsewhere. And by providing that, we found greater commitment from the sales team to actually understand what we're talking about. Now, last thing I would say on that is you've got to use analogies. I think breaking it down, simplifying it, just like Justin said, right? You don't go to an ENT when you got a heart problem kind of a thing. That's the type of analogy that we'll use. Is that, or airports, or other analogies that we've used on here and that kind of thing. That really does make it repeatable, I think, when you make it simple.
They can keep up on things. Just follow Kyle on Twitter. Right, Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact you said it. Current events will sell it for you. And as long as you can explain it to these non-technical audience through those analogies, that's an awesome win.
And the more you follow it, you start to build it over time, like some pattern recognition. And it's really easy to spend a couple minutes and immediately the person you're sitting with, that those conversations change. So, I mean, if you can do it move the needle with 200 people, Mike, I'm thinking that gives a lot of hope to people that are on this call that just need to educate themselves and do it, or have a small team of 1 or 2 people that they can work with and do it. I want to throw things over to Justin. You're hearing this, how the conversation needs to change with customers. So you're dealing with MSPs specifically around, cybersecurity insurance. How have you heard them or lead them to try to change that conversation with their customers?
Yeah, it's a great question, Gary. I mean, I think, we try to make them focus on is that, it's not I'm dictating to you, it's we. Big picture, they're the CIO of the organization. Their client is the CEO of the organization. If we go into a Fortune 500 company and the CIO isn't doing his job, and the guy or girl from Verizon calls their friend at American Express and says, "Oh, your CIO is recommending no before security awareness," whatever it may be, and we're not, like, the CIO is going to get fired. In our world, when it comes to court, you're going to get fired and sued. So I think that it has to be a team concept, not I'm going to dictate to you. So we as an organization need to be doing certain things. We make representations to the insurance company that we are doing certain things. If we don't do these certain things, then I don't have $1 million sitting in the bank. So we need our policy to respond. So it needs to be a we conversation and take out the I'm dictating to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Mike, is that also? I just this as you said that. That's a great point, Justin. Mike, is some of what you're educating your people on is to what you're doing to secure your organization and like that piece of it. So one is there's the landscape, and the other thing is like kind of what you're doing around standards and IR and all the time you've put in, and them understanding that. That's the other piece of building that belief system.
It is. That has to be part of the story. No better example than multi-factor. My organization, just like any other, challenged multi-factor when we rolled it out to all of our sales reps that it's going to be disruptive, disrupt too much time, et cetera. And that was, we kept, no, it's not. It's not if it's done right. And ultimately, when we rolled it out, it was not disruptive. And then all of a sudden, we saw a bunch of multi-factor sales increase across the board because reps could actually show it, for one, and two, tell our story that, hey, we thought it would be disruptive too, and it's not. So yeah, absolutely, it has to be part of that journey.
Gary, can I just say something real quick?
Yeah.
Your show. It's our show. It's our show. But what's interesting, Mike, you talk about, bringing in your CEOs and CFOs and, how you need to communicate. And I just want to, I'm going to not read it exactly, but in domain 1 of CISSP, and you look at the security and risk management, for any of you guys out there, and Wes talks about this, like learning to speak the language of your leadership is a key it's key to personal success in the industry. Your ability to effectively communicate information security concepts to the C-level executives is a rare and needed skill. So I just want to applaud what you're doing, Mike, because that's really, if they can't sell you and your executives, they're not selling the customer.
That's right. I always, I learned this in the financial space. There should be 2 of your key friends in business should be your CFO and your HR director, right? You keep those people happy, things go generally your way. And part of that comes down to understanding what's important to them. Listen, CFOs are not the bad guy. I think when we talk to CFOs and clients, it's always that great. This is the guy that signs the check. I tell you what, there is typically nobody in the business that's better at understanding risk than a CFO when you put it in financial in dollars and cents, right? If you can put it in dollars, they'll buy off on these things. If you go through and Justin talks about the impact of a ransomware event that typically was caused by multi-factor not being in place or a good endpoint protection product, all of a sudden they're willing to spend on those when they understand the financial impact and really what they're protecting. So do not be afraid of CFOs. You just need to learn how to communicate with CFOs, and that's having the conversation.
Excellent. Gary, we transitioning from you over to Kyle at this point?
Yeah. We can go ahead over to Kyle. One last quick thing I had for
please go ahead.
Was, you mentioned this on the last call, is that you see the lack of command that a lot of the customers, when you meet them, the MSPs, have over standards. Like they really haven't gotten down the line. And when you don't have that in your organization, right? Whatever you start with, CIS, NIST, whatever it is, before you get to CMMP, it makes it a lot harder, doesn't it, Justin, to have that conversation? Like they don't have a starting point by which to kind of frame it out.
Yeah, are you talking about like when the MSPs have it with their clients?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
meaning internally, Gary, right? You're saying, hey, if you're not doing
internally and with their clients, they have not gotten that far with their security journey.
Yeah, I think if we're just dealing with the clients like Mike brought up, to use kind of the real world analogies or something they can relate to. I just went to the dentist a couple weeks ago. I can guarantee you that dentist doesn't get medical malpractice if he doesn't, after he sticks those utensils in my mouth, if he doesn't seal them up and stick them in that hot microwave, he doesn't get medical malpractice, because if he takes it from my mouth and puts it into Mike's mouth, the infection rate's going to go through the roof and he's not going to get medical malpractice. So what I'm getting at is there is a standard, whether it's the American Dental Association, the AMA, if you're building a bridge, the AIA, that somebody's following. So I still don't understand why we can't point out to the clients and say, hey, like they got to follow a standard. It's not crazy. I got to follow a standard. And if we don't follow this standard, we could get in trouble. There are fines and penalties that could come about because of that. And I think it needs, again, it just needs, the conversation needs to be, switched from, I'm not the bad guy or girl in the room, right? I'm your CIO. If I don't do certain things and we don't have certain things in place, this is what could happen. if you're looking at me for negligence and you're not taking my recommendation, my policy's off the table. It's no good to you. You either do it or you don't. And, it just comes down to it. I mean, we have to do it at TechRug. Sometimes you just got 200 credit score clients and you got to walk away. You can't give $1 million loans. If you do, it's going to go sideways, and don't be surprised.
I've used that analogy twice, Justin, since you've been on last in regards to the credit score. It goes back to that analogy.
Was that sharing utensils, or is it something else?
Well, we do believe in that, but we just put them in the microwave. As long as you put utensils, kids, in the microwave is what we learned in today's episode. With that said, guys, I think a lot of the audience doesn't realize how much of this is fairly ad hoc. I've been throwing in the chat all the things that I'm learning from Mike. And, Mike, I can't help but think the last time we heard from Justin, he really kind of covered how a lot of the security, culture starts from within. It's an internal effort. And I can't help but thinking about you just shared about the journey first with these sales individuals that first had to start using 2FA internally. Then they could use that experience. They got better to understand the value. And only once they got that, now all of a sudden they started crushing it with those deals. I'm just curious, is that something that, you could share maybe more feelings either on that side of the house of, whether you have to, try before you buy, or how you help your own other folks that are having these struggles? Because I know at Huntress, we actually do some of the same thing, and I wasn't even cognizant that I was doing it, but we kind of force folks to spend time with our threat hunters to be able to understand what we do so they can talk about it better. But maybe other folks aren't realizing that's part of your secret. And I'd love to learn more if you could share us about that, making it part of your sales team's journey before they actually could even sell something.
Yeah, it's kind of a loaded question. So thanks, Kyle. I think it goes back to something that Nathan just put in the chat, right? What standard do you use as an MSP? I would translate it to that and share that journey, right? Like we align with NIST CSF, and most organizations are probably gonna in the United States, and that works, but that can also mean a lot of things, right? And I think that's one of the pushbacks that we commonly get from clients is, well, it's a framework, I don't have to follow it. And, teaching our sales reps the same thing that we went through internally, that, certain things, they can show up on an audit every year, and eventually that looks really, really bad, right? And it goes back to the dental analogy of, you get told you've got a cavity coming, you get told you got a cavity coming 2 or 3 times, and all of a sudden then you've got a cavity. Now you're paying for it. And the same thing happens, I think, with MSPs, and the same thing will happen with clients. So
Except now at the root canal.
Now at the root canal, right?
Yeah,
and that's ultimately what we've seen.
$2,500.
So walking our folks through the process and the journey that we go through internally, how we align with frameworks, why we have to align with frameworks. I think that's actually an important concept. Educating our sales folks as to why we have to do certain things naturally is going to make them better.
And Mike and Kyle, not to interrupt you, I just want to point out one thing. I know you said we don't have to follow the framework, but I will tell you, when we go to court and the attorney on the other side goes, why does the accounting firm down the street have 2FA on email and my client's an accounting firm, they don't? What do you follow? How are you coming up with these recommendations? Outside of testifying in front of Congress and having all these credentials, if you're not following some sort of standard, you're going to lose in court.
That's exactly right, Justin. And that's actually something I took out of the last one is pivot, even just internal with my leadership. I've pivoted certain conversations to something Justin said a couple weeks ago. If you're presenting to 12 jurors, right, how are they going to look at it when we're the technologists, we're the experts? And I think when you start pivoting that approach to taking that angle on it, that's when decisions can change a little bit. I've heard David Powell talk about before, nobody likes to talk about any kind of breach, any kind of security incident, whatever that case may be. Just businesses aren't talking about it. You don't get a bunch of CEOs together and they go, hey, I got hit the other day. That just doesn't happen. There's this stigma around it. And I think once you pivot it to that is part of the conversation track. First off, we're not talking about it. Second off, it does happen. Here's the impacts, and here's why we choose to follow these frameworks, because it's proven, right? We know that we'll get to a better place. Last thing I'll throw on that is one of the frameworks that Nathan had in his thing was he had NIST and CMMC, and I didn't see what the other one was. CMMC is not a framework, right? That's law. There's actual requirements around that. And I think understanding the difference between regulatory requirement versus framework is really important, because we as MSPs, in a lot of cases, are bearing that burden of responsibility for regulatory requirements from our customers through transference. So understanding that impact's important.
say one thing and I'll tee you up for the next thing? Just
go to town.
Because Justin, what you said is like, hey, what framework do you follow? I'm not, the customer pushback. I'm not regulated. I don't need to follow a framework. I love what you said last time about, hey, there's a trampoline and you said on your insurance policy, we don't have a trampoline in the backyard. Someone goes out there, some kid comes across, gets hurt on the trampoline. You can't say, I didn't follow the guidelines of my insurance policy and go, hey, I have no negligence. It's just, that's not what happens.
You're correct. And, the other thing I totally understand, I don't live, and I tell our MSPs all the time, I don't live in this world of, getting your clients to follow a standard is really like chasing an affinity, right? I understand it. It's will they get there? But, it doesn't absolve you of the liability of recommending that they follow a standard, right? And the other thing is, even if you can take 50%, if you've got 50% of clients that aren't following your advice, and we can make that number 20%, if we get into a situation where, God forbid, there's a ransomware attack, and it would have affected 15% of those people that you switched around, we might not run out of limits if we get into a claim situation, right? So again, the closer that we can take that number down of having good clients and take it down to zero, the better. Again, I don't live in a fairy tale world where I know it's going to get to zero, right? But we need to be constantly pushing ourselves. I didn't want to come in and work 6 hours yesterday, but I had to, we just got to keep going.
So I don't know if anybody saw in chat, Tim just teed me up for a question that I was going to ask anyway. So I hear all the stuff we're saying of like, look, we're going to have to raise the bar. We're going to have to do it. But we know this conversation's about overturning sales objections, and SMBs are going to have objections. So Mike, if I'm thinking about these frameworks, a lot of them are teeing up ideas like blue team or defensive efforts. Do you mind maybe explaining real quick what the heck is even like blue team for those that don't know? And then your perspective of how are some people going to either have to add some of those, or maybe as Tim's whole question is, what if somebody just doesn't have the resources, but the frameworks are advising? I think that's going to be a really hard part that a lot of people struggle of. How do I adapt this to those that just don't see the value or just don't have the resources?
Yeah, you got it. So blue team, let's start with that. So what is it? Blue team, I'm going to put it in an analogy form first. I think that's like calling, one of the local city police officers over to your house saying, hey, can you do a walk around inspection and tell me if you were a bad guy, how you would get in and what I should do to strengthen my property, right? Most agencies will do that for you. That's really what it is in the cybersecurity space. We're bringing somebody in that's going to be a good guy in this case, that's going to evaluate our system, find out where it's weak, find out where we're good. And then ultimately we're going to take that list of weak areas, make those action items and strengthen it. How I see that playing in the MSP space, I think first and foremost, we need to be doing it around our own technology stacks as MSPs. That's really important. We, throw it up in a lab and test it there. Or when, to be frank, when you get clients that do test their environment and you react to it and that customer, make sure that you're applying those things across the board so that you're not exposing the accounting firm down the street to another vulnerability that had already been identified by the manufacturing company that just got tested. Right. So I think there's a lot of use cases for it. I do think through the model maturity and some of the things we're seeing with the NIST 853 Red 5, I haven't even been all the way through that yet, but where CMMC and those things are going, you're seeing vulnerability detection and repair become a huge component of these newer frameworks that are coming out, newer regulatory requirements. Blue team, I think, is going to be the thing that makes it actionable, right? It's proving that those technologies are all coming together and that what we're delivering actually works. It's making it so that we can go to a guy like Justin with it. Hey, I've actually been tested and here was the results. And oh, by the way, I've already taken action items and I've turned it into an improvement plan. That's ultimately where I think it's going to go.
Gotcha. It's that age-old trust but verify, and obviously verification is starting to actually have some teeth. There's some cases that you're going to have to show, like, look, this really is verified, or you're going to have a hard time if you're just, doing self-attestation and rubber doesn't meet the road when you go to claim or when you have to prove some of this stuff. So I totally get it. Any thoughts on the, for those smaller clients that, maybe they can't red team? Maybe the point we're making here is your future might be limited of, who you can service if you can't do these. This is where the market's going.
Yeah, I think obviously the beauty of MSPs is the flexibility and the variety of options that we have to consume services. I think in a lot of cases, it's going to be a partnership with another organization, such as one of the fine folks on this call today, right? Maybe a Perch, a Huntress, et cetera, were bring these features into my organization because I'm too small to staff it myself. I think the continuous component is going to be an interesting one. That's, I think, where partnerships and SOC services are going to be very important. Bear in mind, there's also typically a point in time aspect to this too. What I see typically today on insurance forms, do you do this annually? Start with annually, start doing something, and then evolve it into continuous. The best time to start is now. You got to start somewhere. Do that initial assessment. A blue team assessment is just that. It's an assessment. You're starting there, and then you're going to mature it as you grow it forward into something that's continuous.
Okay, I'm definitely tracking there. And Justin, I can't help but think like a year ago, if you rewind the clock, ProPublica came out and they actually labeled MSPs as ransomware enablers. Fast forward 1 year later, CISA and the multi-state ISAC actually came out with a ransomware guide. And I'll be darned, in this September of 2020 guide, it ended up throwing MSPs, I won't say under the bus, it just called it like it was. It called a spade. And it flat out said ransomware infection vector. And literally the title was third parties and managed service providers. And it warned people to take in consideration of these potential threats, these third parties that could do it. I'd love to know, as we're starting to talk about and pivot to the sales side of this, about, the using this as a sales wedge or be able to get into this to talk to new other prospects. Any recommendations in either how to differentiate yourself, maybe to be able to have this conversation, or once again, open that door or wedging customers open into the situation to say, this is where we're at?
Yeah, and to your point, actually, I've seen a disturbing trend from the MSP's clients now. Just in the last 3 months, I've had 2 cyber carriers that said, oh, you work with an MSP, no cyber insurance. So that's another thing that's kind of disturbing. Now you've got cyber insurance carriers that are saying, hey, unless you've got internal IT that we can kind of control, you don't get a cyber policy if you work with an MSP.
Because they're real good at it too.
Whether I think it's right or wrong.
To the fire, right?
Right.
Yeah, I got 60 employees, and I'm going to find someone who's going to take me to the security province.
Exactly.
Right. To work for me.
But Kyle, and I don't know if it's so much of a wedge, right? But I think one of the things that sitting down with your clients is, taking snippets of the application, and showing them, hey, this is what we represent to the insurance carriers that we are doing, right? If we aren't doing these certain things, again, we can get into trouble. I know 5 years ago, it was kind of a hot thing for MSPs to say, oh, I've got cyber insurance. Does your MSP have cyber insurance? Well, now we're getting to the point where I don't want to say everyone is, but hopefully a large majority of MSPs do carry some sort of cyber insurance. I think that the opportunity of using insurance as a, hey, this is why we got to do it. People do things every year in their life, whether you apply for your driver's license in the state, you're checking a box, I'm going to carry auto insurance. If you get your significant other a piece of jewelry, you have to get an appraisal and turn it into the insurance company. If you live by the beach, you've got to turn in, or if you want to take out a mortgage, you've got to get, a flood policy or wind hail policy or whatever it may be. So you have to do certain things to comply with insurance. And I think that blaming, if you want to, the MSP, why we have to do it, oh, my insurance provider makes us do it. I think A, they get less pushback, and B, I hear it allows them to round out accounts and get the clients to do things that they weren't doing before.
Oh, that makes sense. I totally get it. Guys, obviously we only have so much time. I'm curious, you got any what was that, Andrew? No, take it away, bud.
No, I just wanted to get Wes in. I totally spaced on some of Wes's stuff here, so I apologize.
Great T-shirt, by the way, there, Wes. I'll put a request in for one.
The chili is horrible. It's not even real chili, but the shirt is awesome. Yeah, we're waiting for a cease and desist from our friends at Skyline. I'm not seeing it yet.
Yeah.
So we can have Wes take it away a little bit, and then we'll get into the role play, Wes.
I want to go back for a minute to what we started the call with. And Burgard, I've got a question for you, right? So Kyle and I did a session, which, Kyle, we need to redo this again really soon. I think it's come due again, just around demystifying cybersecurity. Like, I get really, as a practitioner, but also a vendor, I get really frustrated when I see a lot of the pitches and ambiguation behind cybersecurity. If you don't know what I mean, go to RSA or Black Hat, especially Black Hat, and you'll just be blown away by what's out there, right? And one thing that Kyle and I did, Mike, is we talked through the cyber defense matrix. So I'm going to post that right here so anyone can see what we're talking about. It's now part of OWASP from Sunil Yu. And what Sunil is doing, it's a great and noble attempt, is demystifying security concepts. And Mike, I guess I've got that question for you is, in your experience in practicing, you know, an MSP of over 1,000, like 1,500 employees or something like that, how have you found that process of demystifying cybersecurity into understandable segments to people that are not practitioners? Like, what keys to success would you point to in that?
Yeah, I think education, common vernacular, which falls into education, and then just, again, good analogies. You got to break it down and make it simple. The common vernacular is important. It was last week or 2 weeks ago, it might have been Justin the last time you were on. One of the things that we drive hard in our organization is certain terminology. One of the things in that being breach. Do not use breach. Nobody in this company other than me declares that, and only I'm going to probably do it when an outside firm's come in and verified it, right? We overuse certain terms. That said, we also have other terms that do mean different things, and hope everybody joins next week, because I think that's a fun conversation that still use got. But I would take things like Microsoft and Cisco, for example, have very different approaches to zero trust. Another security term and another concept that means different things to vendors. So ultimately, me as the CISO in an organization like this, I'm going to control that, again, through these roundtables that we do by talking about what does zero trust mean, how do you talk about it, and breaking it down to an analogy. There's a lot of great analogies out there, and I think that's, again, going to be the easiest way to associate and bring it down to that common level.
Yeah, and Mike, I think it's so important to be able to do that, right? I remember, if I can just share this story, and Mike, you were in the room with this. I remember in the early days of Perch starting to work with MSPs, this is probably almost 3 years ago. I remember Aaron, my CEO, sitting down with you and a whole bunch of others. Andrew Morgan, you were in the room as well. And we just distilled everything down to the difference between prevention and detection. Is like a very simple example of this, right? Instead of talking about, stopping breaches before they happen, which means nothing, or the AI, ML, threat, whatever's that truly don't mean anything, we just said, let's boil this down to the minimum level, the basic level of concepts and understanding, and tie that into really good analogies to drive it home. And it makes so much sense, right? You see people's eyes pop open. Like Mike, one of the things we use at Perch a lot is just talking about like a home security system, right? The reason we put one in is because we expect at some point our preventative defenses, the door locks, are going to fail, right? Someone's going to, jimmy the window open or just come down Santa style down the chimney or what have you. And so it's a great simple analogy to explain the difference between detection and prevention. My question for you, Mike, is what analogies do you love? I've always found myself asking that to people. What have you used successfully, and what resonates with either your sales team and your people internally or with clients?
Yeah, we've got a couple. So if I'm talking to my C-suite, everything's in terms of an airport. And that actually started with my C-suite. That was the CFO started that, and president, et cetera. And that's the equate things. They understand TSA. They understand their role in an airport. They understand detection. Right? Everybody goes through a body scanner, whatever, you have your bag check kind of a thing. We understand those things. We also understand that you get different levels of security based on a price, right? If you want to pay more, you can go through that TSA pre-check line. If you want to pay even more, you can go through that faster line. And that's something that's resonated with that group. So that's the analogy that I'll use typically in that space. Other ways, to be frank, I like any of the medical ones. We talked dentists, we've talked just regular doctors and health checks. Lately, ransomware, and somebody said it earlier, right? It's that 200 credit score. It's like going to the oncologist and them telling you, hey, you got cancer, it's treatable. Do you want to do surgery? And the patient says, no, I don't think so. I'm going to let this one go. You know what? We're probably going to pass on that customer, kind of a thing. So I think the medical field is a very much one that people understand. And then, of course, the home defense. Everybody has, they live somewhere, right? Everybody's got a door for their house, and they do typically understand those things too. So those would be the three areas that we typically will talk analogies. And to be frank, we keep it in that space. I don't try to introduce new analogies unless we really need to. I think that's another part of the story, is keeping the analogy going. So that'd be my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, that's really good, Mike. Like, I've found myself, just for what it may help for everyone on the call, being an educating first CISO, and it's just in my DNA, right? I've been a professor. One of these days when my practicing days are over, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go back to being a professor. I love it. I love the ability to educate. And I remember when I stepped out of education, went into finance, started as a CIO at a bank, I found myself just naturally educating, naturally teaching. And I've discovered it works wonders for not only your organization, but your clients as an MSP, just being that educating voice and distilling concepts in a way that it's understandable to everybody. So Mike, I appreciate that. Justin, I want to turn to you now. So question that is off script that you have no idea I'm going to ask, but the language of this conversation just turned to it. You'll have no trouble with this. In the world of banking, one of the things that we talk about a lot is what's called concentration risk, which is this idea of, hey, I may have one client or too many clients in a certain category that's just causing too much risk to me if there's systemic failure and all of that, right? And we've been talking, and you mentioned, Justin, like it's not possible, but the objective of trying to get down to like a level of, 0 clients that aren't adhering to a standard and have accepted it, that sort of thing. Here's my question. With concentration risk, do you feel like MSPs probably still have too much concentration risk of what I would call bad clients that are going to present too much risk back to the MSP themselves? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, they have to look and identify. I mean, at some point, people born square don't die round, right? You can peel back so many layers of the onion, but you aren't going to get them to change. And so I think that's a big thing in understanding, again, I know we're using credit scores again, but can you make 500 credit score clients, 700 credit score clients, right? In terms of diversification and concentration, making sure that we're in, you're not too heavy in one industry and maybe, spreading it out, pick 2 or 3 industries that you can focus on. But yeah, I think it comes to a point, again, because I just see it, when you have clients that aren't doing the right things, and all of a sudden a lot of MSPs will tell us, well, I know that was going to happen. Well, if your gut's telling you to run, you got to run, because when it doesn't, they are going to point the finger right at you and say, you didn't tell me. And then the lawyer's going to say, or the MSP usually says, oh, no, don't you remember we had that conversation in your office, or I sent you an email? And the lawyer says, I'm sorry, he didn't get the email. He doesn't remember the conversation. I mean, he must have had temporary amnesia. I don't know what it is, but he just doesn't remember it. And so, can you provide us some sort of proof, a critical action letter that you provided for that client? And if you can't do it, again, you got to be defendable in court, because you're going to have 12 jurors that are going to look at you, and they're just common people, and go, if you're the expert in the room, why weren't they doing it? If you thought they should be doing it, why weren't they doing it? Again, a doctor isn't going to treat 2 cancer patients incredibly different. If the recommendation is chemotherapy, he's not going to treat one with holistic medicine, or she, right? So that's the biggest thing to me, is making sure that, even we do it at TechRug, right? If our gut tells us, they got a private cloud exposure, they aren't doing some of these things, we just walk. Like, some of the best clients we have are the clients we didn't work with.
Hey, Wes.
Yeah.
Just going back, you talk about 3 years earlier, and think about the evolution of the maturity of MSPs, right? The ones that today are actually using risk assessment and are internally doing it. I think it's like the psychology term of projecting, right? If you're not doing it internally, I guarantee most of your clients aren't doing it the way that Justin's going to want to write them. And I can't beat that home enough, Gary. Again, it comes back to my years of working with you. Let's use a sales analogy for cyber. You have to have command. You can't sell if you don't have command over your metrics, your numbers, your process. Fair?
Look, there's so much here. I'm sitting here listening quietly. I can't. I'm going from note to note. Like, I can't. There's too much to unpack. I'm on fire right now with stuff, and we don't have the time today to do it. A couple quick points I want to make. Right. Yeah. One is, Mike, you brought up framework versus regulations, right? So regulations are, you have to do it or there's a penalty. And so you'll see people will invest more money. It's part of their business model. If you want to do business with the government, there's certain things, right, you need to do. A framework is different, and it's on us to have a starting point. So I'm going to show you something right now that I drew. I'm also an artist, musician.
I'm looking forward to this. Let's see what you got.
Yeah.
You're the modern day Da Vinci, aren't you?
This is something that way before cybersecurity, that in almost every one of the 1,500 sales calls that I went on as an MSP, if they were qualified at all, I drew this picture. Can you see it?
Up a little bit. And
Ooh.
the box and the blob.
Yeah, that's the box and the blob. And to me, whether you're with, I wrote down sales and VCIO. It's the same conversation, except one's with a customer, one's with a prospect, which is just explaining to them why we use standards. Now, we didn't have security standards. They were our standards to start with. But listen, here's why we use a standard. Here's our starting point. Here's where you are. And then for your business, let me tell you what those risks are for you when you're outside of these standards. And they're different for everyone, right? Not every customer has the same risk tolerance, or they may not have the same cost to what would happen if something was to go wrong. And so if you can make that conceptual sale, that's step one, okay? Then step two is, instead of telling them 50 things technically on what you're going to do, which a salesperson in Mike's organization might not even be able to do, if you can just say, here's how we've solved it. We've solved it with roles, process. Here's the way a normal provider looks. Here's how we look. Do you see the difference? Yes. Do you see why that makes sense? Yes. Can you live with the risk that you have now? No. Do you understand why my customers invest a little bit more? That kind of process is how we can use security like other things. It's not the only one where we can use it as a wedge. So if we can make that conceptual sale, we only have to give as much detail as when we start to get into examples and we tell stories and relate that back to changes or upgrades. And like we said before, if this year in 2020, you're an MSP and you've not gone back to your customers, okay, and told them what changes you've made and what they had to invest because of it, one of two things: your margins went down or your customers' risk went up. 100% of the time, Andrew.
Yeah. And
now I'm all fired up.
But your risk went up too, according to Justin, right?
Yeah, Justin, right. Their risk goes up, our risk goes up. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Hey, so we're at 12, Gary. I know you got a hard stop at 2. We want to do a sales call role play. We're going to bring Keenan up here, and I'm really proud of him for wanting to do that.
Not easy to do, but we're going to.
Yeah, no, it's not easy to do. I've done it with you. It's not fun. It's talk about a root canal. All right, so
hey.
Mike, do you want me to move you off, or yeah? Okay. All right,
go ahead.
All right, I'll close you down. And then we'll get Keenan.
Mike's becoming like a household name, isn't he? He's famous.
It really is.
He is a man. Keenan, you'll see me grab you, just accept and come on up. Hopefully, we didn't test your audio and all that fun stuff, but hopefully it'll work. Crowdcast is only about 5% reliable.
Oh, we're waiting.
Well, first off,
I got the Mike tattoo, by the way, for household name. I took it that far. He's right up there with the Zune and everything else you get tattooed.
Yeah, I get a picture of Mike on my back.
Did you see what Matt put out there, Wes? Of course, Matt Hopper. I hope I pronounced his last name. The Mona Pica.
Oh,
yes. Pretty soon you'll be seeing that in the Louvre, right next to the original.
Exactly. All right. So let's see what's going on here. Bear with me 1 second.
Well, one thing I want to say about Keenan, listen, everybody here is in good company. Like 90% of the people who are on this call are dealing with the same thing, that you run into these situations. Look, some customers make it easy for you, right? They make it easy. And some customers make it really hard, and everybody else falls on some continuum. So we have to develop a position and a process that's effective enough, right? Like you said, if it's your customers, Justin, that we've reduced the risk reasonably on that. And if it's prospects, that we can hit a close rate at the right price that makes sense so that we can build our business. So we have those kind of guidelines to help us.
All right. It says he's accepting. Keenan, I'm going to stop it and try it one more time. Let's do it one more, and then if not, we'll have to move to.
And if not, what we'll do, if people want to, while we're waiting, Andrew, just put in some of the main objections that they get.
Yeah, not
You
only
know what I
that.
mean? Like real world stuff. So it's not us making it up. Like, what do customers say?
Yeah, that's
What
great.
is the issue? We'll go right after it, man.
Right. What are the objections? And then and what are the ones that are so successful? You know, we said people out there, we got 10% that aren't getting objections, man. I want to know
Or they're able to deal with them.
Yeah.
Hey, the other thing we could do, I know Gary Pica just brought on a new client who happens to be Wes's Axe Emporium, fine producer of axes, very sharp, very good. So if we can't get him on, I can certainly ask.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead? We'll see if he can get up here. But in the meantime, why don't you go ahead, Gary? And, you know, one of the things we were talking about, I don't know if you want to use it, we were talking about that CISA guide and we're calling out MSPs. But, I loved what you're doing, the box and the blob as well. But
are people more concerned when they're talking to customers or prospects? It's similar, but it's a little bit different of a conversation.
I like what Dennis put in there. Now, Dennis has been in this space for years. He put in, hey, I'm too small to be a target, Gary.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one, Wes.
Great.
I mean, Hans.
Yeah, let me just ask the question. Look here, all we do is make axes, all right? That's all I do. I get wood, I get iron, I make an awesome axe. Nobody wants to go after me, Gary. And if they do, they're probably going to be afraid I'm going to come after them with my axes, right? So why do I care about cyber?
Yeah. Listen, you probably wouldn't care about cyber insurance unless we go through a couple other questions, Hans. Number one, if something were to happen here, can you still just make all the axes and bill your customers and collect your money if you didn't have access to any of your systems? Because if you can, you probably wouldn't care about it.
Well, you're right. I mean, we do everything by machine now, like machine-based. But Gary, we've never been attacked before, right? So what's going to make it happen now?
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. On your house, do you have an alarm system?
Yes.
Has your house ever been broken into?
No.
No, mine has not been broken into either. But when I leave, I still set that alarm because that one time, right, when someone is going to come. Difference is, hopefully our country is, over time is safer than it was 100 years ago. But your country, which is the cyber country, it's less safe. So I'm saying, all these stories we've been talking about and the articles, right, that I've been sending you, and you've been reading some of our blog posts, seeing about, what's happening. There's more people around now. So again, what you have to do is you have to work under the assumption that your house could get broken into. And that means you might have a security system. It also means you might have a safe in your house where in case someone gets in, your things that are really valuable are even protected further. And that's the way we're going to look at it. I don't know for you that we need to build a moat around your factory, but we do got to put in some basic, protections or not. And I don't know. Based on that, does it seem like saying it's never happened before, so it might never happen?
Yeah. I mean, look, I've never thought about it from like a home analogy, right? Like I care about my home system. I don't want anyone to get in. If they do, I'm going to be really angry. I'm coming at them with axes, right? I don't have a way to come after somebody with axes and swords from the cyber perspective. So I get that. But Gary, look, man, I mean, I'm looking at the cost, the price that you put in front of me. This is high. Like for us, this is really, really high.
Yeah, and I hear that. But you know what? When we were talking the last time we spoke, you were just telling me about a new piece of equipment you put on the shop floor. I think you told me it was over $500,000, right? To me, that's a lot of money. Why would you spend $500,000 on another piece of shop floor equipment? You were already making axes before.
Okay, I got it. So you're trying to get at this from that perspective of if that thing goes down, and I can tell you the cost for us, if it goes down, is $15,000 an hour. So I'm guessing you're going to keep this thing alive and keep it from being hit by some cyber attack?
I'm going to reduce it. I'm telling you, we're going to do these things, and I can't even eliminate it for you. But I'm going to say we're going to take reasonable precaution. Again, we're not going to build a moat, but we are going to put some basic perimeter security on it. Look, let me tell you why we're having this conversation. Because even 6 months ago, I'm going to tell you a couple stories about things and attacks that are happening. I'm going to explain to you that the criminals are not kids in their neighborhood trying to break into your house. They are now, organizations that are focused on this and get it done. And so the situation that we're both in, as me, the person who's here to protect you, and you, right, as the person who needs protecting, it's just changed so much. So just like you, we're not going to shoot an ant with an elephant gun. And if you look at that investment that I asked you to make, you have to look at it relative to your business, to your revenue, to what all your other costs are per month, right? We're still really small costs, per month. But I feel strongly about this, Hans, that I can't let you not do this. If you tell me, like, I don't believe it, we're not going to do it, you and I are going to have a different kind of conversation, because I can't live with your risk.
Okay. I see that. That makes a lot of sense. And I see what Sonny's saying. It's kind of following in light of that, right? My revenue is $5 million, raising the prices by 1 penny to get the security I need. Okay. So I'm sort of offsetting all of this, right? So maybe a couple last quick questions then, Gary. So are we saying that I'm not going to get hit? I mean, that's what I'm looking for, right? I don't want to get hit by some ransom incidents. This is going to prevent this from ever happening, right?
No, this will not prevent this from ever happening. And if anyone you deal with or any other providers tell you that, they're either lying to you or they don't understand how security works. The same way I can't tell you, as putting a security system on your house, that no one's going to figure out how to break that down, that they're not going to have some technology or the level of person that would come in there to be able to do that. What I am saying is, for the investment that as where you are and the size business you are, we're making the smart investments. We do this for 40 other customers, right? We spend all of our time researching what's happening, and we're making things that are going to reduce it to what's reasonable, that I feel like we can both sleep at night. And we also spend time, and some of this investment is what we're doing so we know if it does happen that we're ready to respond to that too. And that costs us money.
Honestly, I appreciate the honesty. I appreciate that you're honest enough to tell me it's not going to happen, right? Because intuition tells me it is going to happen. So I get it, right? I'm a business owner. I make a lot of axes. They're really nice. Like I said, very sharp in case anyone wants to buy one. But I get it, right? I'm not perfect either in what I do, and I'm not going to certify that my axes are never going to go dull. I get it. I guess my last question, Gary, is I'm looking at all this stuff that's in here, and I like these Huntress people. It sounds pretty cool. This Perch stuff, do I really? Can I just
probably not? That's probably the one thing
out here.
It's probably the one thing you don't need. We can take out the Perch.
All right, cool. Yeah.
But everything else, I mean, Huntress, obviously, you have to have. Yeah, but
easy conversation.
You get that. Can I just do this? Can I just do that? And to me, the way that seriously I would answer that would say, listen, Wes, this is the approach. Like we do the research, we live in this every day, and these are the changes that we need to make. Some of them are tools and services like Perch and Huntress. Some of them are just some process things that we're doing, some labor things. We talked about the roles we've carved out. In its totality is what I'm saying. We can get you to a reasonable risk level for a reasonable investment, right? So we don't want to go one step, below that, and you're spending all this other stuff, and we leave what would be an unreasonable hole. And we don't want you to have to think about it. Like, this is our job. Andrew, I'll take it one step further. This is a customer conversation, so I can go right at you pretty hard. If you were a prospect, I always get to the part to go further and say, listen, I'm going to make a bold statement. When you say that, what comes next is what's called an inflection point. It's what they listen to. I feel so strongly about this, Wes, and I'm telling you this, whether you do business with me or not, or choose somebody else, if anyone in our scenario, our quote's going to come in at $4,000. If anybody comes in below $4,000, I would eliminate them from your process. Because based on what you told me you needed to do, and based on the risk conversation we have, remember I showed you how we're set up and those roles and what we do, that's what it costs. So your decision isn't really to spend $4,000 or $3,000. Your decision is, can you live with that additional risk that you told me you're already living with and don't want to? That's your two choices. You can't get $4,000 results for $3,000. Here's the process. Here's the math, man. Are you with me?
Yes. At the end of the day, I get it.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I'm not happy about it, but it makes sense, and I am going to probably sign that paper as long as I get some good kickbacks from those Huntress and Perch people. I need the T-shirts.
Listen, ultimately, my job here today, Wes, isn't whether you should buy from TruMethods or not. My goal here today is that you're making a decision based on actual facts. And if that leads us that you can live with the breach and you could live with that, and you can save $1,000 a month, I'll be the one to tell you to do that. But that's not where we are. So my only thing here is we don't end this and I walk out and you're making a decision and you're making any investment, even $1, for something that's not going to get what you already told me you have to get to, man. Like,
all right,
I'm the messenger here.
I appreciate that. Maybe we can barter for axes later instead of dollars, but Gary.
Oh, absolutely. I'll take almost all payment in axes. Yeah.
Crypto axes.
Yeah. Awesome.
Great job, guys. That was, Gary, awesome. Wes, great job. Really, I love the pushback. I love the way you reframed a lot of it, Gary, agreeing with his objection. Phenomenal. So
Awesome.
Great stuff.
Gary, I know you got to drop, but do you do this stuff in True? Like, I obviously don't know a whole lot about what goes behind closed doors in your guys' service. Do you guys do this type of stuff?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We have a virtual sales meeting. People bring objections, not just about security, but about everything. And in our peer groups, they often will have me we'll do role plays. So we'll sit up there. My only rule is, I have 2 rules. One, they tell me the situation and they have to be the salesperson first or the MSP, and I get to be the customer. And then we flip it around so they can see the difference. And 2, I don't let them record it, because I don't want them to write down my words. I want them to just get the concepts, you know what I mean? And the logic, because once you do, you start to get this command, over it. And it's fun because you're not really selling anymore. You're really just trying to help that person. But it's not easy to do if you haven't put your house in order and you come from that position where, they can feel it. Like almost before you open your mouth, they know you have that conviction, that sincerity.
Yeah, you can see. So, Gary, thank you for spending a few minutes extra. I don't know if I can close.
Yeah, I'll stay on for another minute before I bounce.
Okay. So, by the way, you can hear it in Justin, right? The same kind of conviction. You heard it all day long. You heard it in Mike. And why? Because they do it internally. You can't all of a sudden say, "Hey, we don't do this internally," but we're. What'd you do there, Justin?
My automatic light just went off.
Again, I'll come back to command, Gary. You were able to literally, I think the light went on for you today, back with the box and the blob, which you talked about for years. That hey, we didn't have security standards back then. That there were at the enterprise level, no question. The 853 has been around, but for the typical SMB. So great job pulling that all together. I think this was incredibly impactful today, and I want to thank Justin. Thank you so much for coming back with us. It's great to have you. Mike, Burgard, thanks a million. And the crew, as always, Kyle, Gary, and Wes, thanks for an awesome session 21.
Hans,
next week.
Especially Hans. We want to thank Hans from
Hans, the act maker.
Yeah. Amazing, Hans.
Fantastic. You're welcome. Wishing everybody out there a fantastic day. We'll see you back here next week. For Chris Sanders, will be back, who wrote the book on honeypots. He was feeling
allegedly.
He'll be back. What's that, Gary?
Allegedly. We'll be
allegedly. Back. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.